Welcome back to the Know Your Adversary podcast. I'm Jared Atkinson, and this is Justin Kohler.
Howdy.
And today we are joined by Kate Dawson, our Director of Customer Success here at SpecterOps. And we're going to talk about actually implementing an APM program, some of the different issues that customers are experiencing when they're trying to implement remediations and the different problems and some of the strategies that they're using to be more successful as they go on this journey.
Yeah, before we get started, Kate, will you kind of explain your team, what they do, just to make sure we understand?
Yeah, absolutely. So my team consists of technical account managers that are deeply embedded within their customers' security and identity management teams, as well as a team of support engineers to fix things that are broken.
Awesome. So when we have a new Bloodhound Enterprise customer, what's kind of the first part of that journey for them?
Well, the first part of that journey is talking them off the ledge and helping them realize that everybody is in the same situation with decade plus of Active Directory misconfigurations and prioritizing what comes first for them, which is obviously securing those tier 0 assets, defining those, scoping them out, and then identifying what we want to focus on first.
What do you think? There's probably a bunch of ways we can take this, in terms of struggles that clients usually have, and what do you think is the first roadblock that people have when they start to do something like this, whether it's with Bloodhound Enterprise or nothing?
The first roadblock, and one of the ones that is most challenging for organizations to overcome, in my experience, has been internal politics. One of the hard truths is that security and business are sometimes at odds with each other. Mm-hmm. Security slows down business activity. Getting teams that are responsible for those applications and identity access, getting those teams on board and bought into the idea of, well, you can't just give everybody domain admin across the board, which we've seen before, which is real depressing. Organizations are only now starting to realize or to move towards identity as the primary way to secure their organization.
So you think there's resistance to implementing change is what I'm hearing?
Oh, always.
Yeah.
I think sometimes there's an issue of when you first install the application, you get visibility, and there's this problem to where immediately something you thought might have been a small problem immediately becomes this overwhelming problem. You kind of alluded to that, and so you might have 1,000 things that you need to fix, and the question is where do I start? But I also am familiar with some of our customers. It's even if I choose to fix this thing, I don't even know who's responsible for doing that.
Yeah, that's pretty common too. I mean, ownership across enterprise applications is something that we've been trying to deal with for years. Ultimately, I think one of the largest projects that these teams have to reckon with and understand how to do is you can play whack-a-mole all day on these different individual attack paths, but until Active Directory or Entra is sort of re-architected to indeed isolate those tiers and those segments from each other, it's not going to be successful.
I kind of asked you what was the biggest roadblock, and so change, implementing change, because we don't know what we might break, right? And you don't want to slow down the company. What do you think is the most when you see this in a customer, you think okay, we know that this is going to be really good. In terms of do they have cross-team stuff, or they track stuff diligently? What's one thing that you think sets teams up for success?
Cross-organization buy-in and collaboration is really the kind of a big cornerstone. It's a big metric that we use for our customer success as well. If the teams that we're working with have buy-in from the org, and security is truly everyone's job, then that is a recipe for success.
We've been trying to promote this idea of identity attack path management as a practice, and so one of the general ideas I imagine is probably useful is when organization, so you have that buy-in from lots of people, but you also have like a systemic approach to it, as opposed to one person who's off in the corner that's running their app and like trying to fix things. It's like we have a team and we have a system, and there's integrations with our, the rest of our system to make sure that everybody knows their role, has their responsibility, and things flow through properly. Can you maybe give us an example of what a successful team would look like in doing that?
Yeah. So there's so many tools out there. Everybody's got, something for everything. And there are a lot of applications trying to be that single pane of glass. And like, how many do you need to make a window pane at one point?
Stained glass instead of?
Yeah. So having an established, process with a SIM where, maybe Bloodhound Enterprise feeds attack paths, new attack paths that show up, existing ones into that SIM, creates tickets based on those, and then assigns them out to the appropriate team for remediation. That creates a really great, and then they can, once they close the ticket out, then that remediated attack path then shows up in BHE, and that sort of feedback loop is like, that is super successful. People don't need more applications, they need a better way to streamline their data, to your point.
I've talked to customers previously, and I've been trying to explain that this is kind of the same process that you go through with vulnerability management. It's super similar, right? Instead of, again, talking about issues on hosts and networks, we're talking about identity misconfigurations or user behaviors. Have you ever seen that click in customers' heads? Like, this is a very similar process, because a lot of times they don't understand if this should be in the identity team or the vulnerability management team. And teams are different sizes and maturity. So I guess, like, do you see that? Do you ever see that on the customer end, where they have to understand how they would take an attack path and what we want to do to close those down and shove it into their process?
Yeah. That's when I first started with the team and we started building out the technical account manager program. We were having those discussions a lot, clarifying, attack paths versus vulnerabilities. There's not a CVSS or anything as yet for attack paths. But as we kind of went through it, we realized that aligning with that sort of process and mindset of, okay, here's the score, and this is, how we assign severity and criticality, is very similar, and it's very familiar to people.
Yeah.
So it goes down a lot easier.
It's funny, sometimes we'll talk to customers or people that are in prospect or trial or are exposed to attack paths for the first time. And they say this thing like, well, what happens when we clean them all up? And it's kind of like, it's kind of funny to think about that from a vulnerability management perspective. Like, you're probably always going to have something that pops up, and especially with identities, with you creating new applications, users, whatever it is, there's always going to be something there. And getting people out of this, it's not a sprint, it's like a process that they have to, like, it will always be ongoing.
Yeah.
Like that, it's like a click. Like, instead of figuring out how much work is this going to add to me in a month, like, how can I do this sustainably over time with the teams that are here at my company? I don't know. I guess there wasn't a question there. It was just interesting.
Maybe I have a question. So, like, I know, Justin, you have a presentation where you share, like, how much impact can a team that first installs Bloodhound Enterprise make on reducing attack paths in a short period of time? I don't know the details of that, but maybe you and or Kate kind of give an idea for, it's like, the problem might go on forever, and in fact, we're adding more edges and platforms constantly, and so, like,
research,
there's new research. So, like, we just released NTLM, in March or May or something.
Azure PIM roles.
Yeah, Azure PIM roles. So it's like, you got everything cleaned up, and then we're like, oh, by the way, there's actually stuff that you didn't know about that might present a problem. But can you guys talk about this idea of it's like, there's a lot of stuff that's probably really easy to fix at the beginning that has gigantic impact.
Like loading.
But then there's it gets a little bit harder as time goes on. You have to be more deliberate about how you make those changes.
I mean, I think that's why it's so important to approach it as from a program standpoint rather than a project. It's not anything that ends ever. I think we added, with ADCS, we added a dozen attack paths last year alone. So, Microsoft always keeps things interesting, and So there's always going to be work to be done. People are creative and they figure out ways around things all the time.
There's on the impact side, it probably a lot of times this will happen honestly before they get to Kate's team, but like when they first deploy and they're trialing Bloodhound Enterprise, or like let's just say you first deploy Bloodhound Community Edition, and you're just kind of seeing that the impact can be quite large because you could find a specific configuration. Like I remember one time we found a fax machine that had like full control over the domain head, and it was put in place 20 years ago, so removing that is really really fast, and it immediately drops down risk. We've seen, I think, like on average, we would expect to see a 30% drop in risk over the first 30 days, and that's usually because there's some systematic problem that's both easy to fix and really impactful.
Domain users in the local admins group or something like that.
Yeah,
something that is there. There's a spectrum, right? So there's always going to be, when you first start out, there's going to be things that are like the fax machine is obvious. It's obvious. It's like, okay, I don't need to ask anybody because
that one's just gotta go
that shouldn't be there almost no matter what. If it breaks something, then somebody had a really strange process.
It's kind of like if you were to give an analogy, if you're kind of new to this, it'd be like we're going to scan all the outside of our ports and understand that we have like S3 buckets open to the internet. Like you can have a big impact by just shutting that off, right? Like so, it's the same thing. It's why does everyone in Azure have control over the service principal? Like that's a pretty obvious misconfiguration that has kind of represents a beachhead where any attacker that gets initial access could like launch an attack. So if you take that away, like you have a pretty big impact. And it's also like it feels good, like crush one and have this really big impact and then just kind of build on that over time. Again, like there's the structural, like the low-hanging fruit, right, that you guys will like identify when you first deploy. And then it's like, you talked about the structural change. I'm curious, the structural change is like when you're separating like different classes of users or privileges or identities. Do you get people who have said, I've tried to do that in the past, but we didn't do it correctly? Or is this a completely new concept when you're kind of introducing that?
Oh, absolutely. The number of, you can see those, once Bloodhound gets deployed, you can see those efforts show up in groups and OUs and everything like that. But just like any other problem, I guess anywhere in technology, it's always gonna be a two-pronged approach. You've got the tech aspect of it, taking the fax machine out of domain admins or whatever, and then you've got the policy side because neither one can really do the whole job.
Yeah.
You have to also have these business policies established to prevent that from happening again because it's so easy.
Kind of like the lofty, like you must like least privilege, right? Mm-hmm. We separate our users from our admins. Is that what you mean by like policy, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, exactly. Like just because somebody in accounting needs an application deployed doesn't mean that app should automatically go into like the app admins group or anything like that.
Yeah. I think that's I often look at it from the technical side, and it's like that's my entire view. And then I don't consider the policy aspect, so that's like super useful. It's like if you're going to have the program and you're going to try to actually manage this thing, I think you have to make sure that you consider both, because just because you have a technical solution doesn't mean that you're going to get buy-in or have the ability to actually implement it.
One thing I want to make sure we hit on is how do people measure the effectiveness of their programs, right? Like what in terms of metrics have you seen like people kind of grasp onto or use to like surface how effective their program is or how good or bad they are?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that kind of speaks to the effectiveness of our research team because those organizations that do start to work on remediating those attack paths and cutting them down will see a decrease over time in exposure.
And you're talking about the exposure of like tier 0 or critical identities, right?
Yeah, thanks. You can see that decrease in exposure over time, but then inevitably there's a new privilege that is issued by Microsoft that turns out to be a little less secure than we'd originally imagined, and so that exposure rate, the attack paths kind of jump back up again, and So it's kind of that constant ebb and flow. It is very satisfying to see somebody's risk level exposure go down over time. And the reassuring thing is that when those sorts of things happen, when new attack paths are introduced, everybody gets hit by them. So
Yeah.
it's not something that's unique to any org.
Yeah, so the exposure, like as in total percentage of users or identities in the environment that have access or have a path, an attack path to a critical resource like a global admin or domain admin. You mentioned total number of attack paths like removed as a different metric. Does anybody measure like remediation speed? Does anybody try to do that?
That's one of those things that is really varied by the org. It depends on their security program's maturity, and also just how big they are.
Sure,
We've
yeah.
got some really large customers that they know that it takes 90 days from when a finding is issued to the SIM and a ticket is created. They know it takes a quarter to remediate that.
Is that like change management process?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
because it goes through all of their, to Jared's point earlier, the owner of that privilege has to be identified,
Yeah.
And then the extra effort to make sure that business operations aren't interrupted by the remediation has to be kind of validated, and so that it can take a long time for some really large, really regulated companies
Yeah.
to do. But we've also got really small companies that it's fantastic when we can get on a call and they see a new attack path and let me go fix that right now.
Well, a lot of it, I'd probably like imagine big or small, mature or less mature. And some of it has to do with like what's the level of effort to fix it, what's the impact to the organization if we don't fix it. So
It's a span of
That's really
control thing.
interesting.
I have a cousin who got downloaded BHCE, and he's the sole admin for his organization. And he was like, okay, well, I just went in and changed this, and we'll see what people say, But like, if you're a Fortune 100, you probably don't have the ability.
No.
You might not even literally have the ability to do it, let alone the political will to do it. But
although we have seen like that is certainly true. The bigger you go, the longer the change management or whatever process is, and that's because you don't want to take systems offline, right? It's the same thing for vulnerability management and patching. However, you always have that like critical problem that can get ripped out real fast if so like that kind of speaks to the working together across teams and stuff. So
thank you, Kate. So
yeah.
we appreciate you spending time with us to talk about kind of our experience working with customers on reducing attack paths, and we'll see everybody next time.